Welcome back into another episode of the Daily Fix. I am Stephen Serda. This is Foolish Club Media. We got a lot to catch up on. After a long weekend, plenty of thoughts on the NFL Combine coming your way later this week on Foolish Club Media. So make sure you're on the lookout for the latest episode of Vichi's In with Rocky Magana and Kramer Sansone. As things are heating up across the league ahead of NFL free agency, the draft is finally approaching. We are in the full swing of things this offseason. So plenty of things to catch up on from this Kansas City Chiefs team, as well as across the league. Deebo Samuel, as I mentioned yesterday, is headed to the Washington Commanders. And we finally have some things kind of unfolding for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, some news and notes that are going to kind of shape their roster moving forward, and some things that it seems like we can kind of point to and actually get some definitive answers on this team here moving forward. So if this is your first time on the Daily Fix, quick reminder, as always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything right here on Foolish Club Media. But couple of quick topics. We're not going to keep you too long. We get you in and out on this show and try to keep you up to date on your favorite NFL team. Some interesting notes around the league. We're going to discuss a little bit today. Turk Wharton, fan favorite Kansas City Chief, maybe not the most well-known player across the NFL, but a high impact player for the Kansas City Chiefs, especially last season, a contract year for him. Seems like he's going to have a bigger free agent market than we initially thought. But as I already mentioned, today is the NFL franchise tag deadline across the league. And it's significant for the Chiefs because they were already active and got this thing out of the way. They already decided to place the franchise tag on Trey Smith. And as of right now, Trey Smith and Bengals star wide receiver T. Higgins, only notable players to have the franchise tag placed on them. Now, we'll see if that changes ahead of the deadline later today. But as of right now, it seems like those are the two significant guys that are going to have the tag placed on them. And it's a bad free agent class overall. So I wouldn't expect a ton more action ahead of today's deadline. But I've talked about this a lot so far, and my thoughts on the Chiefs franchise tagging Trey Smith and bringing him back, which is not something that I've ever been opposed to. I love Trey Smith as a player, and when you have a 6th round draft pick who has been a day one starter, who has been a significant impact player for you, these are the kinds of players that you want your team to bring back. These are the kinds of players that you want your franchise to build around. But I still sit here and ask myself, is bringing Trey Smith back really changing anything along the Chiefs' offensive line, which is the reason they lost the Super Bowl to the Philadelphia Eagles, because Trey Smith doesn't solve any of your issues at tackle. And then it really only raises more questions about what the plan is moving forward with this offensive line, because Joe Thuney's entering the final year of his contract. Does that then somehow handcuff the Kansas City Chiefs from being able to do anything significant there? Creed Humphrey's the highest paid center in the NFL. And so I would have to imagine an extension is the key here for Trey Smith. Can the Chiefs really work out a long-term extension for him, make him the highest paid guard in all of the NFL, and then turn to Thuney and try to find a way to make that work and see if there's a way to actually make this the interior offensive line, which will be easily probably the highest paid in the NFL. Is that going to actually help the Chiefs long-term and figuring out their tackle situation? Because ideally it's, I don't know if it's Kingsley Suamataia at this point. The Chiefs have been hinting that they really like him at guard moving forward and maybe not tackle. And then it's like, okay, can they go find a way to make something happen in the NFL draft? And I just sit here and ask myself, like, would it make more sense in a down free agent market, in an underwhelming overall NFL draft class? Would it make more sense for the Chiefs to try to trade Trey Smith? We saw them tag and trade L'Jarius Sneed. This isn't uncommon for teams to do. While They try to make sure that they can get something in return for a player that they don't necessarily think they can bring back long term. And in this free agent market where Trey Smith was easily the top available target for most teams, I'm sitting here asking myself, like, is there more out there that you could get for Trey Smith on the open market than initially thought because of how weak this free agent class is? Like, is the trade return for a player of his caliber going to be higher than you initially believed it to be? And I know contract extensions complicate things, and we see guys wind up going for less than we initially thought, like the Tyreek Hill trade comes to mind for the Kansas City Chiefs, even though they did get a big return for Tyreek Hill. It's just not necessarily like, sometimes I feel like we think like, oh, you want first round picks, and it's just very hard to acquire first round picks. So I'm not saying Trey Smith is going to command something like that, but I would be taking phone calls. I would be seeing what offers are out there, because offensive line play being as bad as it is across the entire NFL, I would have to imagine there's a contending team out there that is willing to give you significant draft capital for a player the caliber of Trey Smith. And I still think the plan for the Kansas City Chiefs long-term is to work out an extension for him and keep him here, as they have been totally honest and transparent about so far. But I would be taking phone calls. I would be seeing what the trade market is for a player like Trey Smith and seeing what you can get in return, because with all of the roster questions the Chiefs have heading into this offseason, I would just be trying to acquire more draft capital at any cost. Now, I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen with Trey Smith, but it is something I would certainly take the phone calls about. It is something I would certainly do the legwork to see what you can get for him and see what teams are willing to offer for a player of his caliber across the league. Interesting note from Jordan Schultz, as I feel like this is kind of flown under the radar a little bit here, because Trey Wharton, undrafted player for the Kansas City Chiefs, and tore his ACL a couple of years ago and worked his way back to health, and has been an impact player for the Chiefs really since they brought him in, and has found a role in this defense. And last year, contract year being his most impactful season of his NFL career so far, Wharton has been a great player for the Chiefs. These are the kinds of guys that fans fall in love with, because he's an undrafted player from a small college in Missouri, and he is a great run-stopping player, has always shown some ability as a pass rusher, and that never stood out more than this past season, where he had 6.5 sacks in the regular season, 2 postseason sacks, and was a high-impact player for that defensive line and that rotation along the interior. And he's a perfect Spags type of defensive lineman. He's got the size, the athletic build, the ability to move inside, outside, like everything that Steve Spagnuolo covets in a defensive lineman. And we saw this kind of work out for the Chiefs last year with a player like Mike Dana, who they wind up signing to an extension, bring back, and it's a super cost-effective contract for the Chiefs defense. But again, in a weak free agent class, it seems like Trey Wharton is going to wind up pricing out the Kansas City Chiefs, because they've got too many other needs that they have to address. Now, while that might be a disappointment for me as a fan, I'm happy for Trey Wharton. He absolutely deserves it. This is a player who has torn an ACL, has worked his way back to full health, and has found a way to be an impact player. And we see defensive linemen like this across the league all the time. I don't think that Trey Wharton, at 26 years old, has even hit his ceiling as an NFL player. So I think he's still got plenty of upside. So if he truly does go out and get a massive free agent contract, then good for Trey Wharton. It's disappointing for me as a Chiefs fan to see the Chiefs let him go, because he has been kind of a fan favorite type of player, but that's the way things go. And Trey Wharton definitely deserves that contract. I just don't think that I initially believed he was going to have this kind of market. But again, in a weak draft class, in a weak free agent class, these are the kinds of moves that happen. And so it seems like Trey Wharton is going to hit the open market, and he's likely going to get a big offer from somebody, and he absolutely deserves it as a player. So I don't know where he's going to wind up, but it seems like it's safe to say he is not going to be a Kansas City Chief next season. But I think most Chiefs fans would be happy for a player like Wharton, who has been that kind of guy who has always done everything right, who has always been a fan favorite, who has always been a coaching favorite here in Kansas City. So happy to see Tershawn Wharton getting some serious interest on the open market. Now, as the NFL franchise tag deadline approaches, things are really heating up across the NFL. And the Vikings pretty much announced they are not going to franchise tag Sam Darnold, which I don't know why they would anyways. With JJ McCarthy waiting in the wings, I understand the Vikings are still like, well, we'd still like to work something out with Darnold possibly to, maybe give McCarthy more time to make sure he's 100% healthy and make sure his development is on track and he's going to be a guy that we can build around moving forward. Darnold would be a good stopgap in that regard, but you don't want to wind up in a situation like the Atlanta Falcons, who are paying Kirk Cousins a bunch of money, and Kirk Cousins looks like a shell of his former self. Now, Darnold's obviously a much younger player, but they've got Michael Penix, who is going to be their starter moving forward. Now they don't know what the hell to do with Kirk Cousins. So curious to see what happens with Sam Darnold moving forward. And then there's just a lot of other weird things going on across the NFL. The Pittsburgh Steelers seemingly are just going to ride with Justin Fields and see if Justin Fields is going to be their starter moving forward. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers cannot, simply because of money issues and contract issues, franchise tag Chris Godwin, who is another player who might be the top available free agent wide receiver heading into the open market now that T. Higgins has been franchise tagged. But the Bucs have been very honest about wanting to bring Godwin back, and they are hopeful to work out a long-term deal with him. Godwin has been honest about wanting to stay in Tampa. So the free agent wide receiver class could get all that much worse. Now, what happens with Aaron Rodgers? All these quarterback needy teams, if Darnold's going to hit the open market, somebody's going to go out there and probably be aggressive in trying to bring in Darnold. And then Rodgers is still floating around out there. But then if you bring in Rodgers, you're basically handcuffed because Devontae Adams, who's expected to get released by the New York Jets at some point this week, supposedly just wants to follow Rodgers wherever he goes. And then the Jets announced that Alan Lazard has permission to seek a trade, as if any team in the NFL would want to go trade for Alan Lazard. Like, it's just fun to see how things are heating up. We haven't even talked about Myles Garrett. Like, are the Browns going to trade Myles Garrett? Are they going to commit to, hey, we have to try to rebuild this thing because we put ourselves in a pit with Deshaun Watson? And it seems like the best way for them to try to rebuild that thing would be to move Myles Garrett for a boatload of draft picks. That's what I would be doing if I ran that franchise. Just lots of things heating up across the league. We are fully in the trenches of the NFL offseason. I'm very excited to see how these things play out. And I am now ready for the NFL draft. I have officially made the turn. I am ready to go. We are fully in it now. Took some time off. I'm rested. It's time to turn the page. I'm ready to go. I'm excited to see where these guys land. I am excited for the NFL draft. I'm ready for free agency to start. So make sure you stay locked in right here on Foolish Club Media. We'll have everything you need to know. Again, franchise tag deadline today at 3 p.m. Arrowhead time. So be on the lookout for any news and notes from that. Latest episode of V-Cheese with Rocky and Kramer coming your way on Wednesday afternoon. They'll break down the NFL Combine, all the guys that impressed them, guys that they're on the lookout for the Kansas City Chiefs. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And then plenty of other things coming your way on Foolish Club Media here in the coming weeks as we get ready for the NFL draft. So as always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. As always, stay locked in right here. We've got everything you need to know this NFL offseason, and I will talk to you tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Fix.